Bear prints in the Czech Foreign Ministry, Tinker Tailor Soldier Hacker in Moscow with a side of Humpty Dumpty. Gamer forum data breaches go undetected for 17 months. Credential reuse and the limitations of human memory are seen as a big threat to security. An IBM study throws up its hands over the state of healthcare cybersecurity. And Phineas Fisher, depending on whom you believe, is either under arrest or still at large. And now a quick thank you to our sponsor, Palo Alto Networks. You can visit them at go.paloaltonetworks.com/secureclouds. Businesses and their data are heading to the cloud in record numbers, making the cloud an integral part of almost every enterprise-level organization. Palo Alto Networks understands this, along with the fact that your data and applications are distributed across the private cloud, the public cloud, software-as-a-service environments, and any number of configurations in between. Make sure that your data and apps are secure and protected wherever they may be. Palo Alto Networks delivers the broadest, most comprehensive cybersecurity for private cloud, public cloud, and software-as-a-service environments. Remember, secure clouds are happy clouds. Find out how to secure yours. You can get started today at go.paloaltonetworks.com/secureclouds. And we thank Palo Alto Networks for sponsoring our show. Major funding for the CyberWire podcast is provided by Cylance. I'm Dave Bittner in Baltimore with your CyberWire summary for Wednesday, February 1st, 2017. International conflict in cyberspace raises a few interesting stories today. The latest government to experience what has the signs of a fancy bear visitation, that is, attention from Russia's GRU, is the Czech Republic's. The country's foreign minister disclosed that its email system has been illicitly accessed. Foreign Minister Lubomir Zaoralek said the intrusion appeared to be the work of a nation-state. He didn't say which nation-state, but he pointedly observed that the incident looked a lot like last year's email doxing of the U.S. Democratic National Committee. General consensus among observers, and there's not much dissent in evidence on the matter, is that it's probably the work of Russian intelligence services. We've seen reports that ISIS information campaigns suggest that the caliphate is beginning to splinter. Whether this foreshadows a terrorist diaspora or tighter centralized control is still unknown, but it appears that the Fishers are due to military pressure in the caliphate's core claimed territories. Thus, it seems to be kinetic and not information operations that are hurting ISIS. U.S. Central Command's WebOps information campaign against ISIS is drawing poor reviews from both observers and whistleblowers. Bloomberg characterizes WebOps as a botched operation. Critics allege WebOps has been a slipshod effort marred by indifferent linguistic skills, tendentious self-assessments, and cronyism. The campaign prominently featured engagement with ISIS adherents and potential adherents in social media, but critics see such engagement as defeated by poor mastery of Arabic vocabulary, let alone idiom, by the operators. The FSB officers arrested by Russia are now being officially accused of ties to the U.S. CIA, so there clearly is an espionage dimension to the scandal. That doesn't, of course, rule out criminal corruption as well, especially given the interpenetration of cybercrime and cyberespionage researchers see in Russian practice. Bloomberg columnist Leonid Bershitsky wrote about the FSB that, quote, parallel to their official duties, officers often run private data security operations involving blackmail and protection, end quote. Apparently, the online gadflies of Shalte Bote really have put a burr under the Russian leadership's saddle. The bigwigs are particularly exercised over its revelation of discreditable communications among Kremlin insiders. This gives the affair some symmetry with corresponding American uneasiness over the role WikiLeaks has played in shaping public opinion. According to Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Vladimir Enikeyev, Shalte Bolte's founder, has also been arrested, but hasn't been charged with espionage. An article in the Moscow Times suggests that the incident represents characteristically fierce infighting among security agencies, and that in particular the FSB's Information Security Center may have grown too powerful for the liking of its rivals, and those rivals are now being permitted to purge it. Two of those arrested, Colonel Sergei Mikhailov and Major Dmitry Dugukayev, belong to the Information Security Center. It wouldn't be the first time in Russian history that one intelligence organization has purged another. The news isn't all tinker, tailor, soldier, hacker. More conventional forms of cyber threat, of course, persist. It appears that personal information of about 2.5 million PlayStation and Xbox gamers have been exposed in a hack of gaming fora Xbox X360 ISO and PSP ISO. The hack occurred in 2015, but its details are just now coming to light. One of the challenges facing cybersecurity professionals is the proper allocation of resources. You've got a budget and a team, but how do you decide how much of those precious resources get channeled toward any particular task or threat? Trustwave just published a survey report titled Money, Minds, and the Masses, a study of cybersecurity resource limitations. And we spoke with Trustwave's Chris Schueler about what they found.
It's a very deep and wide chasm that CISOs and VP of securities have to go fill, and to get funding to fill all those various voids and gaps, it can be very expensive. So I think the challenge is what we're seeing, and obviously the report kind of does back it up, is that they're trying to conquer the achievable, and that's the low-hanging fruit, and going after the endpoints, going after email, web filtering. Those are probably the most heavily utilized in an organization. So they're obviously getting funding for those items, but they're not getting funding for the rest of the items. And many of those items are the ones that they need probably the most focus on, because they're going to find probably the nastiest stuff that would impact their environment.
I was interested to see that the report found that turnover was a particular problem.
Yeah, turnover's been a very big challenge in the industry itself, and predominantly it's because when you look at the skills that are required within IT security, it's been a huge evolution for us. As our understanding of the various attacks against organizations, we've quickly realized that there's a lot of positions that needed laser focus for those security challenges. So if you look at 10 years ago, the generic IT security admin or engineer, the skill level was, let's say, a level of 1 to 10, it was a 5. And I think what's happened now in the last decade is, as our understanding of the attacks and the way that the cyber crime organizations and government nation states, they've become much more sophisticated. So subsequently, the skills required for the good guys have become more challenging, right? So you have people that maybe have entered the security space and entered it at the lower level, and then quickly directionally saw that they had an expertise in a given area, right? Maybe it's pen testing, incident response, deep threat research. And the challenge is that a lot of organizations, specifically private organizations, their ability to fund that growth is a challenge for those individuals. So like anybody would do with a hot and very demanding or high demand skill, is they're going to go look out in the market and see if anyone's willing to pick them up as a threat researcher, for example. And people do.
That's Chris Schueler from Trustwave. Cybersecurity in the healthcare sector continues to prompt eye-rolling from industry observers. In the UK, half the National Health Service trusts only scan their web applications for vulnerabilities annually, if that often. Looking at the sector as a whole, IBM offers some despairing lyricism. It's a leaky vessel in a stormy sea. Finally, Spanish police say they've nabbed Phineas Fisher, famous for hacking the controversial lawful intercept tool providers Gamma Group and Hacking Team. But Mr. Fisher has since communicated that he's safe and still at large. Time for a shout out to our sponsor CyberArk. The riskiest vulnerability any organization has lies in its privileged accounts. When those who wish you ill gain privileged access to your enterprise, they can do almost anything they want. They own you. CyberArk is the only security company focused on eliminating the cyber threats that turn insider privileges against the enterprise. CyberArk stops those attacks before the attacks stop your business. Consider ransomware. a billion-dollar criminal market. CyberArk Labs tested more than 23,000 real-world ransomware samples and found that by removing local administrator rights and implementing application control policies, none of those ransomware samples could encrypt files. To learn more about CyberArk's research and the ransomware they studied, visit cyberark.com/cyberwire to download the free report. Secure your privileged accounts from endpoint to cloud with CyberArk. That's cyberark.com/cyberwire. And we thank CyberArk for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Emily Wilson. She's the Director of Analysis at Terbium Labs. Emily, doxing. You wanted to make the point that doxing is becoming more of a common thing to see online, particularly in your world, in the dark web world.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. Doxing has been around for a long time now. And, when you think of doxing in its original form, what you see is people taking revenge on other hackers or gamers or people in a particular kind of community online. And now this is becoming a much more common thing being used for, people in the media that you don't like, or politicians that you don't like, or, executives at companies you disagree with. And it's become much more fair game. And I think it's no longer something that crosses a line, right? This is part of just the normal playbook. I don't like you, or you said something I disagree with. I'm going to expose your personal information. And in some cases, your spouse and your kids, and here's where you went to high school, and here's your next door neighbor. This is definitely becoming just kind of part of the way things work. And
are you seeing sort of the availability of doxing as a service, if you will?
I think it's interesting. Doxing as a service isn't quite what we see presented. It's actually more, you'll see things where someone will provide a list of targets and say, have at them or have fun. And so it's much less, hey, I'm here to dox anyone that you need. That does exist. It's much more of a, hey guys, here's a list of names, let's have fun. Or sometimes much more personally, this is my ex-girlfriend, make her life miserable.
So rather than having a book club or a gaming club or something, people gather around online virtually and come at people for sport.
Yes, definitely. And I think in some of these places, in some cases it's groups against other groups. So, here's Anonymous attacking, a group of, a trade association they disagree with. But in some cases, it's a group of individuals gathering around another individual for sport. And it's creepy is the word that comes to mind.
And from your point of view, monitoring this sort of thing, are there ever indicators where you can, point out to someone, hey, it looks as though there's a group that's starting to gather information on you, or heads up, or is it more spontaneous than that?
It depends. Always the great answer. It depends. There are definitely times when, a group or an individual is making a shift to a new industry or a new interest, or a, hey, watch this space, and what that actor tends to be focused on, so you have a sense. In other cases, it's a bit more spontaneous, as you can imagine, right, whatever is in the news cycle. So whether it was, politicians during the election, or, certain information during the, Dakota pipeline situation, or, even law enforcement in the wake of a police shooting, for example. There are certain things like that where you imagine this has happened and someone's going to get doxxed. I'm not sure who it is, but there are a few obvious choices.
All right. Interesting stuff. Emily Wilson, thanks for joining us. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, along with interviews, our glossary, and more, visit thecyberwire.com. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the show possible, especially to our sustaining sponsor, Cylance. For more information about how Cylance can help protect you, visit cylance.com. The CyberWire podcast is produced by Pratt Street Media. The editor is John Petrick. Our social media editor is Jennifer Iben, and our technical editor is Chris Russell. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.